There are 7 top candidates remaining in the Democratic primary. They were showcased on that South Carolina debate stage. And it's worth noting that 4 of them, so most of them, are largely defined by their economic positions. 2 billionaires who are only in the race because of their past business success, and 2 economic populists who Washington Democrats once considered both of them way too progressive to ever get close to a nomination. Now, while Senator Sanders surges, he's clearly not alone in pushing this party to the economic left. Elizabeth Warren arguing they actually share similar beliefs, and she is the one, she says, with the results.
Bernie and I both wanted to help rein in Wall Street. In 2008, we both got our chance. But I dug in, I fought the big banks, I built the coalitions, and I won.
And that brings us tonight to a new installment in Backstory, our special series that goes deeper into candidates' records. Our goal is to try to report beyond the daily headlines, and there are many of those, and examine a key backstory about a single person in the race in each installment. So tonight, right now, for Elizabeth Warren, let's be clear. The cause that animated her career shaped her political evolution, and it defines her campaign to this day, advocating for working people in legal and financial systems that are increasingly stacked for big banks. And that's not what most really young lawyers do. Even many law professors focus more on explaining legal history than trying to make history. But dating back to 2007, then Harvard professor Warren concluded from her scholarship and her studies that the financial laws weren't really neutral. They didn't simply patrol the playing field like a referee. They tilted it. That any individual American consumer would tend to be outmatched wildly by the organized power of Wall Street. Okay, that's a diagnosis. Some would disagree with it. A lot of people agree with it. But what do you do about it? Well, then as now, Warren views problems as an opportunity.
They're ready for change, and I got a plan for that. I got a plan for that. In fact, I got a lot of plans. And yes, I got a plan for that.
Back in 2007, Professor Warren's plan was to create something that could pool the power of consumers who aren't in any way organized or united like a banking industry, and then protect them. The idea was a dedicated federal agency to protect citizens against the banks, the same way other laws protect Americans' health and safety against a product that a company might find they could sell for a profit, but which is otherwise really too dangerous that we would want it sold in the first place. So to see why that is a logical policy, consider the toaster, which at first glance seems like, you know, an innocuous household appliance until...
You get the video of it.
Okay.
Woo! Yeah, yeah!
In the wrong circumstances, when there are certain extra factors, this toaster that we all know about, this is real video we found, the toaster can turn into a fireball.
There we go. Now she's gone.
That is toaster on fire!
Just what we needed.
Fact check true, that is toaster on fire. Now, burning toasters are dangerous. That particular flaming toaster experiment went down outside, but a really cheap toaster can be more profitable to sell than a more expensive safe one. But the fact that the toaster is unsafe makes it more costly for everyone when it catches on fire. That very basic, call it flaming point, is exactly the point Elizabeth Warren made when introducing her idea for the consumer agency, writing that federal law makes it impossible to buy a toaster with a 20% chance of bursting into flames and burning down your house. But, she wrote, the law does allow banks to sell mortgage plans with the same 20% chance of putting a family out on the street. Quote, the difference between those two markets is regulation. And that's how Warren explained her idea in a 2007 article in the journal Democracy, advocating a stronger system to check the incentives for banks to seek profits when they force larger costs or bankruptcy on consumers, on you. And that ranges from areas like toasters, sure, that's the non-financial example, to mortgages, to student loans, to credit cards. Now, that was 2007. Bush was president. Alan Greenspan finished a record run at the Federal Reserve to bipartisan acclaim. Washington had been deregulating Wall Street. Few were talking about getting tougher on the banks or eyeing the potential risk of aggressive Wall Street deals and complicated financial instruments that the banks said made everybody richer. Until things changed.
On the broadcast tonight, meltdown. The American financial system is rocked to its foundation.
Share prices continued to tumble.
Lehman Brothers was forced to declare itself bankrupt.
Stock markets crashed.
Bankruptcies.
Foreclosures.
A global meltdown.
And the government bails.
Everything changed like that. Warren's solutions started getting traction. Congress began that controversial bailout of the banks, who took those risks that got Americans into this mess. Now, Warren allies might call it the risky toaster bailout. Some Democratic leaders, though, saw the Harvard professor as the voice of reason. Democrat Harry Reid putting her on the congressional panel to oversee that bailout. And, rare for a regulatory expert, her work started to draw wider notice.
Do the banks think they've done anything wrong?
You should ask the banks.
I think I know what the banks would say to me.
Warren seizing the moment to go well beyond Harvard and publicly advocate her ideas.
It's going to go one way or the other. We're going to decide basically, hey, we don't need regulation. You know, it's fine. Boom and bust, boom and bust, boom and bust. And good luck with your 401k. Or alternatively, we're going to say, you know, we're going to put in some smart regulation. It's going to adapt to the fact that we have new products. And what we're going to have going forward is we're going to have some stability and some real prosperity for ordinary folks.
And that's socialism.
There's that word socialism. Congress didn't tackle all the changes reformers wanted, and no major bankers went to jail. Few were fined for those financial acts that caused far more damage, remember, than individual citizen offenses in taxes or bankruptcy, which individual citizens sometimes have their lives ruined over, even ending up in jail. But Congress did pass a Wall Street bill that Obama signed in 2010. And of the thousands of ideas that are pitched in op-eds or academic papers or books, it's remarkable to remember that Warren's plan became law, creating the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Democratic leaders thought, also, why not tap the person who thought this idea up to kick it off? And the president asked Warren to help get the party started.
I have known Elizabeth Warren since law school. She's a janitor's daughter who has become one of the country's fiercest advocates for the middle class. And 3 years ago, she came up with an idea for a new independent agency that would have one simple overriding mission: standing up for consumers and middle-class families.
Even after the crash and a Wall Street bailout that was opposed by Americans of all ideologies, however, Mitch McConnell led Senate Republicans to try to block Warren and obstruct the lawful agency from doing its work. You know, looking back on it now, it actually looks like a kind of a Republican banker's dream idea of Merrick Garlanding Obama's Wall Street agenda, with most of McConnell's Senate caucus vowing political extortion, threatening to oppose any permanent director of that new agency unless it were basically gutted, and also along the way slamming Warren.
We're pretty unenthusiastic about the possibility of Elizabeth Warren. We're pretty unenthusiastic, frankly, about this new agency.
The White House tasked Warren to work on launching the agency without technically nominating her, a way to draw her out and have her work with her expertise while sidestepping that Republican vow to block her.
The first question is, why not take that fight to the floor of the Senate?
Well, you know, I have to say, I've never walked away from a fight in my life. You can ask my 3 older brothers about that. But the point is, the time spent fighting is the time not spent doing the actual work of this agency.
Warren did some of the work of getting the agency started. Obama then nominated her deputy as the first official director. And the new agency went on to confront those very financial interests, along with the mission that she had outlined, cracking down on payday lenders who prey on low-income workers with their own brand of burning toaster short-term loans, forcing debt collectors to change some of the ways they do business. And after all that money flowing from taxpayers to banks in that bailout, the agency turned some of it around. It fined, for example, Wells Fargo $100 million for misleading people. Much of that money went back to consumers, back to you. But on the other hand, the agency's work, we should note, was criticized by even some of Warren's own fellow economic progressives for failing to do enough to protect, for example, students from predatory loans. And apart from McConnell's partisan stonewalling, there are other conservative economists who argue that basically the agency still doesn't have enough oversight, which makes it a separate new problem, unanswerable to anyone and potentially hurting business growth by launching investigations without cause, imposing fines without any remedy. They're arguing there's not enough due process. Now, those are debates about how this all works, debates worth having. But under the Trump administration, there are efforts to just undercut the agency's entire agenda of holding Wall Street accountable. There's a fight over its very leadership now before the Supreme Court. As for Warren, it's kind of striking to observe that Mitch McConnell's obstruction of her in particular backfired on him politically. Remember, had she been confirmed, she would have been really busy with her new Obama administration dream job. But blocked from that very long-term appointment by Mitch McConnell, Warren was suddenly free to entertain other ideas.
Elizabeth Warren, the very, 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 very popular consumer advocate who is currently a key advisor and a high-profile advisor in the Obama administration. Democrats are now reportedly wooing Elizabeth Warren to run against Scott Brown for Senate in 2012.
Senator Scott Brown was a blue state Republican McConnell really needed. Warren turned to go run against him, and she didn't change her message about consumer protection. She's just sort of basically unleashed it in a new venue.
There is nobody in this country who got rich on his own. Nobody. You built a factory out there, good for you, but I want to be clear. You moved your goods to market on the roads the rest of us paid for. You built a factory and it turned into something terrific or a great idea. God bless. Keep a big hunk of it. But part of the underlying social contract is you take a hunk of that and pay forward for the next kid who comes along.
Warren won that race, cutting down McConnell's majority by at least one vote, and was soon at work confronting some of the very financial leaders her agency was battling.
So you haven't resigned personal earnings. You haven't fired a single senior executive. Instead, evidently, your definition of accountable is to push the blame to your low-level employees who don't have the money for a fancy PR firm to defend themselves. It's gutless leadership.
Warren's plan for this agency to protect people from the banks, to protect them from credit cards designed to put them in debt, from risky mortgages that are worse than flaming toasters. It's the foundation of everything she's been doing in policy and politics since. So as we do in this series, it's interesting to note that whatever happens in these early states and on to more states voting in Super Tuesday, part of democracy is always an ideas primary. And it's notable that so many of the things Warren was pushing for, almost in an obscure or progressive set of journals, are now not only some of them law, but they're getting more attention from more people in the Democratic primary and maybe the kind of ideas that someday could take Democrats all the way back to the White House. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.